Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings NBA plays video for Wednesday, February 3rd. It's an 11-game slate on there. It's a very tricky slate to navigate through. We got 5 games that have double-digit spreads. There are a lot of totals up in the 200s, so we should see a lot of points scored. There are some injury concerns that we have to look at. Definitely on that Sacramento side, a couple different ways that things could go. So there's a lot of stuff to put together, but that's why I like these big 11-game slates, because the better you do at narrowing down all this stuff and the more research you do, these are the days where I think that I have the advantage, and people who do the research have an advantage, because there's not going to be a lot of overlap. There are a lot of ways to go, and if you can put together a roster that is a little bit off the beaten path that can still get to the top, could be very low owned and help you win a tournament today. So let's call up the slideshow of some of the guys we like and get into why we like them. Some of the guys we're going to be talking about today are Myles Turner at 6,300, Derrick Favors at 6,900, Michael KiddGilchrist at 4,500, Raymond Felton at 4,500. And then I want to have a quick discussion about Rudy Gay and Darren Collison tonight. There are rumblings in Sacramento that Rondo might not play, and also that Boogie Cousins might not play. Now, Cousins I'm less concerned with, because he did practice yesterday, so I think he will be in. If Cousins is out, I think you have to start Rudy Gay, because he's the guy that picks up the slack scoring-wise, put up a big 50-point game last time. So if you have no DeMarcus Cousins, I think Rudy Gay is somebody you definitely want to look at. Chances are, though, we are going to have DeMarcus Cousins, and it looks like Rajon Rondo, with what they call turf toe injury, is probably the more likely of the two at this point to sit out. So if Rondo sits out, I definitely think you have to look at Darren Collison as a cheap option as well. He'll probably see 28 to 35 minutes if Rondo is out of this game. And if that's the case, I think that Collison is somebody I'm going to want in a lot of lineups for pretty cheap. But let's get into the other guys who we think are going to be basically in play regardless of what happens with the Sacramento situation. First guy we're going to talk about is Myles Turner at 6,300. If you haven't watched this kid, he's for real. He can play. They're in a game, the Pacers are favored by 7 going up against the Brooklyn Nets with a total of 202. Now, Turner is the clear-cut starter at power forward right now, and especially with Mahinmi out. He's going to see big minutes with no Mahinmi. He's played about 30 minutes over the course of the last 10 games or so, and those numbers are always higher in the games that Jan Mahinmi doesn't play. He has 8 straight games where he's gone 5.2x value or better, and in 6 of those 8, he's been above 30 fantasy points. Now, at his price, which has come up to 6,300, 30 fantasy points is still 5x. So in 6 of 8, he's giving you a floor based on what he's playing today. And again, he's played a couple of those games with Mahinmi in as well, so the numbers were a little bit down. Without Mahinmi, he's easily been putting up 30 or more fantasy points. He has double-doubled in 8 of his last 10 games. And on top of that, he's chipping in an average of 7 rebounds and 2.5 blocks per game over this run. We've seen him have games already, multiple games already with 4 or 5 block shots. And remember, at 2 points a block shot, that's an extra 10 points that gets added to his score right away. So if he can get a double-double and get 4 or 5 blocks, he's already up in the 35 to 40-point range, and is going to give you big upside at his price. The next guy we're going to talk about is somebody who I love. I know a lot of other people aren't as high on him as I am, but Derrick Favors at 6,900 is somebody I'm going to be rolling with. His team, the Utah Jazz, favored by 7 points over the Denver Nuggets. So even though the total of this game is only 196, 196 is a paced-up game for the Utah Jazz. This is a pretty high total for them. Denver is bad at guarding big men, so Favors has an advantage there. And he's still discounted from his pre-injury price. At one point this season, we were basically paying up almost $8K for this guy. And now we're getting him at a little bit under $7K. So you're still getting him at a 10 to 15% discount from where he should be. And I think it's a 10 to 15% discount on a guy who's in a great matchup. He played about 35-ish minutes in the last 2 games since his return. So there's really nothing that's telling me that, after the first game or 2 where they took it easy, that this guy's not going to see 30 to 35 minutes again here tonight. He has back-to-back 30-plus fantasy point games. And as I said, he's still rounding into shape. It's an upside game for him, so I do expect him to outperform those recent numbers. If he gets me 35 fantasy points for 6,900, I'm going to be very happy that, that's a pretty safe number in cash. And I do think that he has the upside at low ownership today to help me in the tournament if he does go for 18 and 14 and 3 or 4 blocks or something like that. The next guy I want to talk about is Michael KiddGilchrist. I want to start off by saying that Cleveland is going to absolutely murder Charlotte today. Charlotte's playing this game definitely without Kemba, without Nick Batum, and without Al Jefferson. You also have guys like Jeremy Lamb, Jeremy Lin, and Cody Zeller, who have been in and out of the lineup a lot lately, and some of them might sit this game out too. You know, my whole thing with MKG here is he's just too cheap for what we expect to see out of him today. He should see 30-plus minutes, and he should be asked to do a little more in this game. Maybe do a little more scoring, a little more ball handling, be on the court a little bit more. And at 4,500, I think that's just way too cheap for a guy who should be out there and have a pretty high usage rate with all the big scorers and, you know, usage rate ball dominators on his team all out in this one. He's actually averaged 32 fantasy points per game since his return. He really needs to get us about 24 for, you know, a solid cash game value and somewhere above 30 to give us a GPP upside. Even though it's a tough matchup, probably going to see some LeBron defense on the other side. Cleveland has been playing at a faster pace, and a faster pace, you know, it's like a rising tide floats all boats. So even though that this is a tough matchup, I think that Gilchrist is going to have just such a high usage rate, and it's going to be a game that has such a high pace compared to what some people think it's going to be. Even if it does turn into a blowout, there's so few guys on this Cleveland team that I still think he'll see a few minutes in the fourth quarter, you know, although probably not a ton because he is still coming back from injury. But I'm expecting 28 to 32 minutes out of Gilchrist today. I'm expecting about 30 fantasy points out of him. And at this price, that's just too good to pass up. The last guy we're going to talk about is probably the, you know, the longest shot on the board today. And I think I actually wrote his price down. I think 4,100 was his price the other night. I think he's 4,500 today. And that's Raymond Felton from the Dallas Mavericks. It's not really a great spot for the Mavericks team overall against the Miami Heat. The Heat is a pretty good defensive team, but there's a chance that Hassan Whiteside misses this game again too. He's been out for a while, and they're a completely different team without Whiteside. They play at a faster pace. You know, obviously they're not as good defensively without the anchor in the middle. So I do still think it's a pretty decent spot for Dallas here. Darren Williams is pretty much out. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but it looks like it's going to be a multiple game injury that he suffered in the last game. So Felton and also J.J. Barea actually should both see a big jump in minutes. Felton is actually the cheaper of the two. Like I said, I wrote down 41 here, but I think he's 45 today over on DraftKings. J.J. Barea is actually closer to 5,000. He might be like 48 or 4,900 today. So I'll take the discount that you get on Felton because I also think Felton has a higher ceiling. You know, J.J. Barea, we've seen him come in and, you know, put up some decent games in the 20s and maybe even touch into the 30s. But Felton is a couple $100 cheaper and has that same kind of upside, if not more. We've already seen Felton, you know, Darren Williams has missed a handful of games, maybe 6 or 7 in the last month and a half or so. And we've seen Darren Williams put up games of, I mean, we've seen Raymond Felton put up games of 30, 35, and 39 fantasy points with no Darren Williams since December has rolled around. So, you know, we've seen him do it before. Whenever Darren Williams is out, you know, there's going to be some other guys. Darren Williams and Devin Harris are both likely out in this game. So that basically only leaves Felton and Barea as the two guys that are going to be playing at the, you know, point guard role. And you're also going to see Felton a little bit at the 2 spot, you know, backing up Wes Matthews, because those three are basically going to be the backcourt rotation here. And of those 3 guys, I think Raymond Felton's the one that I like the best. So that pretty much sums it up for some of the guys that we're looking at here tonight. You know, we tried to give a good mix of guys who, you know, you can play in both cash and GPPs. That prices aren't too expensive. There's not a lot of huge studs I want to pay up for on the slate, mostly because most of these studs are in some of these, you know, big total games. So I'm still trying to figure out which studs are the ones that I think the games are going to stay closest, which usual allotment of minutes. But I think that these are going to be a lot of the guys that I build the core around and maybe rotate different, you know, studs from some of those games, hoping 1 or 2 of those games does stay close. And, you know, obviously the high usage guys that are the studs are the ones that get the points. And then using these guys from the other games as the value guys to be able to fit in 2 or 3 of those studs and hopefully wind up with a roster towards the top of the leaderboard tonight. So thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.